Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 3.
The Gale Force Wins podcast is proudly sponsored by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association. The NLCA provides unparalleled opportunities for its members through industry education, construction information, government advocacy, and networking events. The NLCA is building Newfoundland and Labrador. For more information, visit nlca.ca. All right, folks, we're back on Gale Force Wins. This is a very special edition. This is the 3rd anniversary edition, and we're here in the beautiful Alexandra Resort in Turks and Caicos. And Allan, Dale, and I are so pleased to be here, so pleased that you followed us along this journey. Allan, tell me a little bit about what you're thinking.
Oh man, it's what a year it has been. The amount of conversations that we've been generating, the optimism, the positive messages has been overwhelming. It's the only way to describe it for me, Gerry. It's like recharging a battery. Every time I get into a conversation with somebody, I feel better about myself coming out of the conversation. And to be honest with you, like if there was ever a time in the world right now that we need a positive message, it is now. And I think that we're tapping into something here that's very powerful. It's much more powerful than just the business itself. It's a sense of optimism. It's a sense of things can get better and are getting better, and we're meeting the people along the way. What do you think?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. It has been an incredible journey, and a very good, important friend of ours is coming here now. And Alvin Hegner, he's been doing some work with us, but this chair is empty right now because there's so many more conversations, Allan, that we're hoping to do. You know, the other thing that I'm going to just say is that following this little chat, and it's going to be a little brief, is a recording of what you and I were doing in terms of brainstorming before Gale Force Wins was Gale Force Wins.
Right.
I stumbled upon it. One of the things you know was that I like recording a lot of things.
Do you?
I was surprised that I actually had a Zoom recording of me and you talking about the name and all of that.
Gerry, 2024 is going to be very exciting. There's little doubt about it. We've left an empty chair here because this chair here, to me, represents the blank canvas that 2024 is for us. So many more optimistic conversations to come. I know there's a lot of people following, and thank you very much for following. If you have a suggestion of people to talk to, just reach out. We'd be honored to have them on the show.
And I'm going to say this to you, Allan. I've been in a sole proprietorship for 35 years. Nothing compares to this business relationship that we have. It's been, being a sole proprietor can be lonely. This is something else. This is special. So I'm going to say thank you to you for
well
this
done,
journey.
Gerry.
What follows is a brainstorming session on Zoom between myself and Allan on November 25th, 2020, before Gale Force Wins was even Gale Force Wins. During this brainstorming session, we actually discuss what we think all of this might look like.
You wrote the proposal for them, or helped them quite a bit, and then all of a sudden you get the business. That's basically how it works, right?
I know. I just started recording this because you know what? It's part of the idea. I'm not going to anything that we talk about, confidential. I won't. But I think once you and I have this concept, and I've kind of jumped again now, but I think we could do a few interviews, until we get face-to-face, and whether we ever need to get face-to-face again, I don't know. I think that you and I having this banter and bringing on someone, with all the people that we know, surely to God we can convince someone to come on and shoot the shit for an hour, When I look at Joe Rogan and what he has done, it's interesting. He basically just started talking. And then he got some really interesting guests to come on board. I think his Elon Musk interview where they, lit up a joint really got a lot of attention. And, he was already popular prior to that, but that exploded his podcast.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think you're right, Gerry. And I reflect back to the whole idea of we just got to get on with it, right? And do something and put it up there and see what kind of, response it gets. There's a lot going on right now. And I think that there's a lot we can talk about. But I mean, most importantly, it's about, we got to figure out what that little micro niche is, right? Like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to help people find a job? Are we trying to help companies pivot? Are we trying to show people that it's okay to take chances, and that relates to getting a job, and that relates to getting more business? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to say to people, pause for a moment when you see something happen? Like, a great example is, look at what just happened with Verifin, okay? Now, everybody is looking at it and they're reading about it. I look at it from a different angle. I say, okay, how can that benefit the greater Newfoundland ecosystem, or better yet, the Atlantic Canadian ecosystem? What has happened there? What about that purchase is unique? Because I'm certain Verifin had some secret sauce, but it's nothing that couldn't have been discovered out of Silicon Valley, right? So why in the Christ did NASDAQ see so much excitement in Verifin? I think I know the answer to that. And it was not only the secret sauce and what they were doing in terms of technology, but it was also the people that were in the back end of this thing. And if you look at the company and you say, okay, well, what's going to make my company tick? It's going to be the people, right? It's going to be, if I can't get the people engaged in doing what I need to get done, if I don't have a stable workforce in place, then the secret sauce doesn't really matter, right? But I think that's what Verifin had, and I think that's what Atlantic Canada has. So Atlantic Canada has, in my opinion, a pretty stable and loyal workforce, albeit we may not have academic programs and stuff that might support that yet, but they didn't in Silicon Valley 40 years ago either, right? So if you start to look at things that happen around you from a different angle, and then look at it and say, okay, how can other companies benefit and celebrate that, right? And that to me, so Verifin to me represents exactly that. And then if you couple that on top of, look what's happened in this fucking global pandemic. I mean, Atlantic Canada created a tiny little bubble. Yeah. There was economic challenges associated with that. But for every economic challenge, Gerry, you and I could point out 10 companies that thrived in the middle of it. You just told me of one. Thrived in the middle of this economic challenge. Why did they thrive in the middle of this? Because what we have here is something other people want. People want to come to Atlantic Canada. They want to come to Atlantic Canada because people realize now you don't need to be in Toronto to do business, right? You can easily live on Ross Road, have a wonderful lifestyle, drive your kids to school, be home for breakfast with your wife before she might go out. Like, all of the things that if you were to close your eyes and say, what's the perfect scenario, you can have right now. So these companies need to be telling that story differently, not just about what I have. Here's my secret sauce. You want to buy it. You got to look at it very differently. And to me, so this is where I struggle. I'm talking a lot, but this is where I struggle, is I'm struggling finding the niche. Like, when you and I start talking about these things, what is the niche? Is the niche more business? Is the niche getting a job? Is the niche satisfaction or, work-life balance? Is it whatever? What is the niche? Because without the niche, I think we're too random, right? But I think once we get the niche down, then we'll quickly realize there's dozens of conversations that we can have. And then we can finesse the thing and say, okay, do we want this thing to be a 12-minute podcast? Do we want it to be an hour long? Because personally, I find when the podcasts run too long, as interesting as the guests might be and all of that shit, if it runs too long, I just tune out,
Yeah.
right? And furthermore, you forget some of the good nuggets as the thing goes. That's why I don't necessarily enjoy Howard Stern, but I do like his interviews.
Oh,
And
he's one of the best interviewers,
right.
bar none, I think.
His interviews are tight though, right? They're tight, they're personal, they're approachable. I like it. And I like the fact that Robin's involved too, because it's dynamic. She doesn't say a whole lot. She's off in the corner. It's fluid, right? You know what I mean? It's a nice flow to the whole thing. And that, I think, so I think once you get that micro niche down to say, this is what Gerry and Allan are going to talk about, then we decide, okay, great. Now, how do we structure a number? Like, how do we get 10 out of the gate and just do them, post them, bring in a couple of interesting people to have a conversation with in the middle of all of it and see if that generates anything, and then get moving. God, the whole concept of it sits well with me.
Well,
Anyway.
You know what, Allan, you and I love this topic. I think that's what gets me going, and yes, I'd like this to be successful financially, but the other side of this is if this could potentially bring some concepts and ideas and help, maybe it's a thing where we end up having really good conversations. And if it motivates me and you to do some good for the rest of the day, maybe we do it once a week and it's in the morning and you get pumped and off you go. That's my idea. But like let's just come back to the Virfin thing. And I was thinking about, I was exchanging an email and a text with a friend of mine. He actually lives in Stephenville. And I said to him, think about this. We are in a time where you can do business like you and I are. When I reflect on the last 6 weeks, I did a lot of business. 99% of that business was done in this room using this technology. Yeah. So I did not have to say, okay, I'm meeting you at 11 a.m. We're going to go over to Jumping Bean and we're going to see if we can get a table, and I'll get in my car, meet you, you'll get caught in traffic, I'll get caught in traffic. And, before you know it, an hour-long meeting, you get 2 hours gone. In this type of scenario, you can book, literally, you could do 8 meetings and, literally my coffee is upstairs and it takes me, 5 minutes to get it ready.
Yeah. No, I take your point. Actually, Gerry, you might have really hit on something there, right? Maybe it's the 3-minute motivation podcast first thing in the morning by Gerry and Al. Then you just open it up, 3 minutes on your way to work, on your way to whatever. It's a 3-minute podcast. You know what I mean? It's a motivational podcast.
Well, I thought about some names, like Shooting the Breeze, and the only thing about it, like, I like wind, and I like, I came up with a name, Gale Force Wins, WINS.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not bad, right? 2 guys living on islands on the eastern part of Canada. Yeah. Gale Force Wins is not bad. And it's just, but to me, it's about looking at what's happening around you, right? And maybe that's what it is. It's being aware of what's happening around you. When something happens, what in there is the unique value proposition? Whether it's the Virfin piece, whether it's just new technology and how it can apply to something around me, whatever the case may be, whether it's Keller Williams. Like, why are they having so much success? Why all of a sudden is Newfoundland having a real estate boom when all things being equal, Gerry, they should not be? Like, you know what I mean? Like, oil and gas is gone, and I don't know that it's coming back at any time soon. I mean, especially with Biden down in the States. Furthermore, without oil and gas, what other resources and markets does Newfoundland have? With fisheries and all, I get all of that, right? But on the outside looking in, there's not much there that would indicate a real estate boom. Yet it's happening. And I know why it's happening. I'm pretty certain I know why it's happening. Because the people there are good, decent people. It's a good way of life there. People want to be a part of that. People want that in their life, right? And what a safe landing this is.
You just reminded me, I was at a restaurant one time and there was a man sitting next to me who I knew. Their office was overlooking Conception Bay. So picture that. I can't remember the name of the exact part of the Conception Bay it was. But yeah, so anyway, he's sitting there and he's having a chat. Of course, you're in a restaurant and this guy across from him is trying to pitch him to move his company, lock, stock, and barrel, to Montreal. And I'm sitting there with one ear listening to this, and they're talking loud enough where I'm not, yeah, okay, I'm eavesdropping, but shit, man, it was a phenomenal conversation. This is maybe 20 years ago. Anyway, you know what he said? He's a French man. I don't know if he grew up in Montreal or if he's from Paris. I can't remember. Emergency alert of the National Publicly Alerting System. Did you get that?
No.
Sorry, I'm getting distracted here. Anyway, yeah, he says to Buddy, he said, why would I ever want to move my business to Montreal? He said, I currently have a business that overlooks the ocean. Yeah. My team can see whales jumping. He said the creative juices that flow because of that are off the charts. And I'm thinking, wow.
Yeah, right? 100%. I mean, I had the same conversation I had with a company. They had offices in Montreal, and every time, and they were probably less than 500 meters from Bombardier. It was a manufacturing company that I was dealing with. Every time Bombardier went on a little bit of a hiring spree, he would lose 30% of his staff for an extra $1.50 an hour. They'd be gone. And then he would have to spend a tremendous amount of time, energy, money to retrain staff. Bombardier would go on a hiring spree. He'd lose another little tranche of staff. Decided to move office down to PEI. Because PEI, not only could he pay the staff less, which wasn't the motivator. That wasn't the motivator, to pay them less. The motivator was, I've got a loyal staff, a dedicated staff. And some will say, well, it's because they got nothing else. There's nowhere else to go. I'd say that's bullshit. There's a difference. In Atlantic Canada, people tend to be a little bit more loyal to their employer. Look at what you're doing, Gerry. You don't need to do what you're doing. No. But you feel an actual obligation to help. I get loyal to a company, right? Yeah. I almost immediately, and it's not a, I always thought it was a military thing. It's not. It's an Atlantic Canadian thing. It's a sense of loyalty and dedication to your company. You're part of something. You want to help them. You want to, just like you want to help your neighbor, you want to help your company grow. And that's a good thing. That's a good feeling. Like, anyway, and I think that companies see that. And I think that that's why Atlantic Canada, in my opinion, is prime to, if they're smart about it, they're primed to tell this story. And they should be telling this story. Housing is cheap. The people are lovely. The culture is remarkable, Gerry. It's remarkable. I've traveled all over the world, as have you, and the culture in Atlantic Canada is a beautiful thing. There's no doubt about it. There's music, there's food, there's humor. We don't take ourselves serious. It's just beautiful.
I agree with you. And it's funny, Al, you get better weather than we do. I mean, weather is certainly a big challenge here. That being said, I'll never forget it. 2012, we're in San Francisco. I'm there with the family. I'm there for a conference, so I brought the family. 3 o'clock in the morning in the hotel, an alarm goes off.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't even know what the alarm was for. But I do know that in every washroom, you see, not just in case of fire, but in case of earthquake. And I'm thinking, okay, we're getting out of here. 3 o'clock in the morning, we go down the stairs. I'm carrying one of our children in my arms. And I'm thinking, in some places, you're only, a decade away from total devastation, potentially, And I think there's so much to be said for the quality of life in PEI, the quality of life in Atlantic Canada, downtown Montreal. And I look at the lineups, in trying to get into a restaurant and all that, you don't have any of that here.
No, and the interesting thing is, I live in Charlottetown, and I would argue, well, up until this pandemic, but I would argue I spent more time downtown Toronto than most people who live in Mississauga did. And I'm an hour and a half flight away. The airport is 4 minutes from my house. I arrive at the airport 15 minutes before the flight goes. I get off the flight in Toronto. I get on a train. I'm downtown within 25 minutes. You could hardly do that if you lived in Mississauga.
I know.
You know what I mean? You couldn't do it in most cases. So I don't know, Gerry. To me, there's a lot that we can talk about, and maybe that's the niche. Maybe it's just being in Atlantic Canada, and Gale Force Wins, and we can talk business, we can talk family, we can talk all of those things in the podcast. But maybe that's where we start. Maybe we start a couple of Atlantic Canadian, couple of guys living on islands, in Canada. And you bring in, maybe through the course of time, we bring in guys that live out on Galiano Island on the West Coast. And maybe that's the niche. Island living. Well, what is it about islands that, do you know what I mean? And then you can, and then you can start having conversations with people in Iceland, in the Faroe Islands, and Shetlands, and all those. You bring these guys into the conversation, and two of us talk about island living, and we start with COVID. What's it like to live on an island during COVID? Like, how did we pivot? How did we, maybe we start with our own personal pivots, living on an island. How did we pivot through COVID? And then we move that through, and we talk about little wins that have happened and downs and ups and downs, and how do you turn those lemons into lemonades or whatever, right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe the little conversation here has led us to the point that it's really about two guys living on islands.
Well, it's funny. I think about airplanes and the airport. I remember being on a conference call with Montreal, and I said, "Oh, got to go." I said, "My plane leaves in 30 minutes." And the lady was like, "What do you mean your plane leaves in 30 minutes?" She goes, "Boarding?" I said, No. Boarding is like in 5 minutes. The plane leaves in 30 minutes. And she goes, "Gerry, you're going to miss it." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm literally about 5 minutes away." And I said, "I will walk up the escalator, show my boarding pass, and be the last person on the plane." And that's the way I used to do it. I hated sitting around in the airport. Now, there was a couple of times I got burned a little bit when there was a few other flights, but most of the time my flights were at a time when there was only one plane. The concept for that person in Montreal, where I could literally leave my house and be on a plane flying within 30 minutes, was very difficult. Very difficult for them. But, it's convenience. You live in a big city and you get all the opportunity for entertainment and all that, but there's some incredible entertainment we get.
But again, Gerry, to that point exactly. I hear that all the time. Oh, you live in Toronto, you can go to. I've been to more Blue Jays games than most guys who live in Toronto.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Honest to Jesus, come on, fellas. Yeah. You live there, you don't go.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right? Anyway, yeah.
Well, I think that framework of that document that I sent is probably something, we need to figure out frequency.
No, yeah, look, the first one, Island Chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of, we're on the same boat. I think we're in the same boat, thinking about the same things. Just a free-flowing conversation. And I think a guest, like you said, you got Howard Stern, you got Robin up in the corner there, and then what he does really well is he relaxes the guest, and the guest talks. And I used to listen to him on satellite radio when I used to drive the island a lot. Yeah, I mean, you know, his crassness and he's all this sexually charged bullshit he gets on with is just kind of to attract a bigger audience, I think. But the fact that he can actually have some of the best interviews and people open up to him about anything, that's what I find interesting. And, you know, if you and I are to get someone on this podcast, a successful business person, a politician, whatever, you know, being able to draw that out is, I think, a skill that we have. It would develop over time. And, you know, I think we probably think about who we could potentially get first, just to have a chat, you know, and you do it in this format here. I could actually, I'm recording this, I'm wondering how I can use Zoom, and I don't know how to hook that into some of the, you know, social media pieces. I'm sure there's a way of doing it where it could go live. And if it doesn't go live, it gets recorded and edited down and put up later, you know, because I don't even know if Joe Rogan goes live. I don't think he does he? Maybe he does. I don't know.
But, and he's his only podcast, right? There's no video, or maybe there is and I'm not aware.
Oh, no, there's video. Yeah.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Can I tell you the reason I got this microphone? Because sometimes when he's making a point, he'd grab his microphone and pull it forward. And I'm thinking, that's a really good setup he's got, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you go to YouTube, you'll see a lot of videos.
Okay. Yeah. So on that, I mean, like, for example, out of the gate, right? Like, maybe you bring in Rick Hill there. Say, Rick, you got a great gig, very important thing you're about to embark on. Give us some ideas. Like, you know, I mean, we're both island guys here, and you came from an island. How do you find yourself having led the military through campaigns, coming from a small island? What about it? What about that situated you to now take on one of the most important jobs in Canada, to get Ontario its vaccination? Just explain to, never mind what you're about to do. Never mind that. We're not really, that's interesting enough. But explain to us how coming from an island gave you the foundation and the courage to take that and move that forward. What about that? Right? And just ask him to talk about that for 5 minutes as a motivation. Right. As a motivation to kids that are on islands, that are living in remote places, and more people are moving to remote places. See, the other challenge is you got all of these people who grew up with the mentality that you got to live close to the core. You got to live close to Toronto. You got to live close to Chicago in order to make money. And now they're having kids and they're saying, well, holy shit, maybe my kids don't need to be close to the core. Maybe they can make money anywhere. Maybe I can live in a small place, give them a good lifestyle, and they'll still have every opportunity before them. The answer is not necessarily on Yonge Street, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do we pivot them towards that, right? So that we can encourage and to show people that there's opportunity here. There's opportunity where you didn't think there was.
Well, you know what, Allan, you make a good point. And if you think about this country, islands is pretty narrow. And I'm getting to a point here. When I was part of my career, I had Saskatchewan, of all places, as part of my responsibility. Multiple trips. One trip in particular, I had to go from Prince Albert down to the southern part. I can't remember the exact community, but I literally, with a lady who was there, my job was to help her kind of learn the sales process. So we literally, from PA down to Moose Jaw and something south of that, went multiple places. And it struck me as I did that, my career as being on this island here, it was very similar. Every community we went into is an island in and of itself. In fact, in a couple of places, I'll never forget it, some of people, like, there was a young fella there that said he had never been out of, I don't know, I think Selkirk, I think it was called, something like that. I said, what do you mean you've never been out of here? He said, oh, I'm 21, you know, I'm happy. I go up in the woods. He said, I've never been to Winnipeg, never been to Regina. I'm like, what? He could have gotten in it because he's just 21, 22 years of age. Think about that. You know, I remember my grandmother telling me she had never been to the top of Signal Hill. You know, she was born in 1899 or something. You know, back in the early 1900s would have been hard to get to the top of Signal Hill. But I don't think in her entire life, prior to me driving her maybe in the 80s or 90s, whatever it was, she had never been to the top of Signal Hill.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess the point is isolation and remoteness is kind of blown up now because of this technology. And you and I
100%
can have chats about that. And
it's 100%, Gerry.
Well, here's the other thing. Back to Verafin. Think they have 2,000 banks. How many of those pitches were actually done with the 2 people, 3 people, 10 people sitting in the same room? When you sign up those banks, I mean, in the initial stages, Verafin didn't even have a name, and maybe they had a budget for travel. I mean, I know they do a lot of traveling but what percentage of their client list was done maybe through some sort of communication like this? So I think about Verafin, and they were sold for 3-point-something billion Canadian, 2.75 American. They're set up so well for pandemic times because of the fact they're a tech company. And if you think about the tech world, like, I feel bad right now for brick and mortar companies, particularly in Ontario, and I think there's a bit of a mishit in the way they're approaching the fact that, the Walmarts of the world can stay open, but, Joe Blow, mom and pop got to shut down. I don't understand that at all. But I'm glad from a business perspective that I don't have a bricks and mortar operation right now, and I'm not dissing anyone who has it, but, you think about your restaurant business when you were involved in that.
And the last time I bought a car, I bought it on my phone, and the car showed up in my driveway. And when I sat in my car, my agent called me as soon as I sat in the car. He says, Al, I see you're in the car. Let's go through a few things. Anyway, but I take your point, and I think what you talk about in Saskatchewan is about self-reliance and being resilient, right? And I learned that. You learn that quickly in the Navy, right? You leave the jetty, and that's it, man. It's you. You got to figure this shit out, right? If the engine breaks, you got to figure that out. Right? If you run out of food, you best figure that out, right? You got to, all this shit you got to figure out. And that's what it's like living on the prairies. That's what it's like living on an island, right? It's that self-reliance. So what does self-reliance mean? That means that you got to have all the shit, but more important than having all the goods and all the things that you need good relationships. If you don't have good relations with people, none of this shit matters, because somebody else is going to come over and take your canned soup. Right? You need to have good relationships. So, but that's the thing. So when we have, and when we have these podcasts, Gerry, and when we have these guests on board, I think what we need to be known for is we need to be short, concise, get them talking. But I also think we need to have a takeaway. Everyone has to have 1 or 2 or 3 takeaways. So you say to your guest, or we leave the podcast with, here are the takeaways for today. Here's what we think is important. Relationships matter. Take a chance. Make the phone call. Whatever the point is, you're going to take away. And so you say to your guest, look, Rick, if you had one thing to leave the podcast with today, this extensive group of people that we have, we're now up to 12. This extensive group of people. What is that?
12 people on our podcast.
What is that one thing you would say is important to you? What is that one thing that really makes Rick Hillier tick? And it could be something as simple as, look, family matters. Don't lose track of your family, because that's your foundation, right? Call your mother every day, whatever the one takeaway is, right? Let that be the takeaway. So somebody ends their podcast with Gerry and Allan. That's kind of interesting. But the one thing that sticks with them is Rick Hillier said, call your mother every day. That's what resonates with me the most, right? And
Love
then, anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, back to the, I love that. And I think, like, I'm getting more excited about this as time goes on. And as you're talking, Gale Force Wins. That just came to me last night.
That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. That's great.
Well, the acronym GFW, Grand Falls Windsor, I'm sure they, but anyway, back to the car business, Allan. It strikes me what you just said, and I know that was a Tesla that you bought, right? That whole experience.
Yeah.
You talk about disruptors. I know there's a Toyota dealership in California that's the biggest. I can't remember the name of them. They're the absolute largest dealer of Toyotas in the world, and I think something like 70% of their sales come from online, where a rep doesn't even get involved. Wow. I'm going to tell you something now. Here's a scenario. So the business office of a dealership is a very intriguing place. It's where you're in there, you've made a deal on your car, it's $40,000, then you got to go in the box, they call it. So you're going to go in and sit with the business manager, who's then going to try and upsell you on their, paint protection, all of their insurances, because the electronics might go and all that. There's a guy in Grand Falls who's doing this virtually. And I have been talking to him through our, business, and we're going to help him with his website and some marketing. But he's fascinating. He's got him and another person. I think he can scale his business up dramatically. What I said to him, I said, in the business I was in, there was a time where a young lady didn't get approved. She needed a co-signer. Well, guess where the co-signer was? In Labrador. There was some sort of stipulation that wouldn't allow the paperwork to be done because they weren't physically together. That was a bank stipulation. And I'm thinking, so I'm talking to this guy in Grand Falls. Now, he's totally focused on, he's not on vehicles, he's on recreational vehicles. The car business is a little bit different. But anyway, he said that it can scale up to that. His point was, there's absolutely no reason why, if I wanted to sign for a loan and you were my co-signer, Allan, just because you're on PEI should not stop you. You can electronically sign something nowadays.
You buy a house with that.
Look at the vote. You can vote by mail down in the States or here. Why can't you do it? Anyway, long story short, that man in Grand Falls is going to disrupt an entire business. He told me there's a company in California right now. Get this, they started 10 years ago. He said there's very few players, but that company has revenue of $300 million. Anyway.
Yep. 100%, Gerry. 100%. It's disruptive technology, right? So, yeah. So I think, oh man, I'm excited about it now. But now I feel we've narrowed in. Certainly, I'm all in on that name. Gale Force Wins, to me, sounds fantastic. Now what we do is we have to figure out what is the podcast about. Maybe it's about just living remotely, whatever it is, right? Two guys living on that's the other thing. We got to kind of come up with a catchy little 11 seconds. Two guys living on an island, blah, 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 whatever our story is, right? 11 seconds to open the thing up. But then how do we pull people into the conversation? So what is that niche? So the niche is it resiliency? Is it self-reliance? Is it life? Is it managing your life? Is it gaining business? Is it thriving? It's thriving in remoteness is what it is, right? It's thriving in remoteness. We're on remote little islands, and if you were to describe our life to somebody from Mumbai, to somebody from Beijing, to somebody even from Los Angeles, they'd scratch their head and they'd say, "You're kidding me. You live on an island with X number of people, and you have 2 McDonald's restaurants, that's it," or whatever, right? All of these things that might blow their mind. Yeah. And yet we do business across the globe quite successfully. And we're quite pleased with it. And when I want to take my kids to school, I do, right? In fact, that is one of the highlights. It actually is one of the highlights of my day. Every day is to drive my son to school. 100%. And always has been. I always loved taking my kids to school. Gave me that few minutes to have a conversation. I can do that because of where I live, right? I know that every day my wife can go see her aging mother every single day, right? And that's important to me. That's important to our family. So It's thriving in remoteness is what it is. And you know what I mean? And so then you bring your guests in and the theme is thriving in remoteness. So, okay, Rick, you came from here. You came from this little tiny town on this little tiny island on this country that's not very populated. How the hell did you get from that point to becoming what now you're about to take on, one of the most critical roles in Canadian history?
Yeah.
In our living memory, right? How did you go from there to there? Never mind what you're about to do. Never mind what you did for the country or the military in Afghanistan. Tell us succinctly, what about your upbringing allowed this to happen for you? So that other people that are living remotely around this globe, whether they're in village number 127 in Pakistan with a population of 80 people and 200 kilometers from the nearest community, how do they thrive? What is that one thing, Rick, that we can take away from your upbringing that allowed you to do all of this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's a huge takeaway for people. People are intrigued. Oh, wow, that's pretty niche, right? Pretty niche. He thrived in the remoteness. How did he do that?
Well, you know what?
I lost your audio.
Audio gone?
Oh, there I got you. Maybe I was just talking too much.
No, you weren't. This whole concept to me, and I've always thought about this, Al, is, you think about these people that create these things. I mean, the long-term vision, if this thing became successful, it would become a kind of a platform for expansion into, Gale Force Communications or something like that. You see these podcasters and they create networks based on a very small kind of a concept, like a conversation. And it's funny, actually, Gale Force Communications is a business that actually exists. Gale Force Marketing exists. The other thing, and just to pivot on that comment, the word Gale and your last name Dale rhymes. And from a marketing perspective, there's all kinds of things down the road you could play off on that, Yeah. Anyway, I think what the next steps are right now, I'll spend some time just thinking about an approach. And ultimately, to your point, that comment you made to me about, too many times people just spend all their time tuning the guitar and never get the gig. I think we just go headlong into it and have a conversation. It's obvious we do like chatting, and I think there's a rapport here that we've developed over 30 years. And, even though there was a very lengthy gap in between, the conversation and the interesting path that we've both taken that's brought us back together. And then you throw someone into the mix like Rick Hillier or whoever. Right? Maybe we get one of the Verifin founders on this podcast, or a Mark Dobbin, who was one of the first investors, to the point where, and something that's always intrigued me is individuals. And when I started work at VOCM, the man who owned the place, very wealthy man, what motivated him to come in every day? When you've got millions of dollars in the bank, you don't have a second's worry about ever being financially strapped for anything. Obviously, there's other motivators, and I find that fascinating. Now that I'm getting to the point where, I can take or leave an opportunity financially, I kind of understand a little bit more about what motivated these people. I spoke to a guy at a golf course a couple months ago, and he was asking me what I'm doing. Oh, he said he saw that I'm into this new thing. And I said, well, I spent, for the first time in my career, a lot of time off during the pandemic, and I realized, man, to just sit around and read a book all day, which I love reading, it can be pretty boring. And like he said to me, he said, yeah, you got to do something. This guy's got 10 businesses on the go. Very wealthy guy, but he's out, he's in the public eye lots of times now, trying to, he's starting a hatchery or something, millions of dollars invested. He's got millions to play with, but what do? Sit home and twiddle your thumbs? Like, that's boring as hell.
Keep them focused on. This is about thriving in remoteness. This is what we're talking about here. Thriving in remoteness. If you want to give us a story, if Rick Hillier wants to give us a story about a team that was caught behind enemy lines, there was only 6 of them, and he wants to relay that and parlay that into his own life and how they thrived under remote circumstances, whatever, you can do that. But we want to get you right back to, we want one takeaway. How is it? What should we know about you that can be somebody else can use that's now thinking about working remotely, thinking about moving somewhere like where we live, thinking like raising their kids in a place like that? What is that one thing that you can leave us with so that when they'll forget all the conversation, the rest of the jokes and the laughs and the bit of humor that we had along this podcast, but what will they take away? What is that one thing? And we lead the podcast with that. Rick, at the end of all of this, we're going to ask you for one thing, and that's it. So what you got to start thinking about that one thing, because this is what we're going to leave people with here today. And if we that, and that's the gift, right? And that's the gift that we're giving them. That's the value in tuning into us. Because I got to tell you, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I like them. I really do. There's never, and none of them are doing that. None of them are saying, here's the one thing you should remember.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that there's, people that are, well, there's a dozen things that we should pull out of this. I know that. I get that. But to the person we're talking to, what is the one thing we should, and then maybe you and I hear that one thing and we say, that's incredible. I agree. Or here's the one thing I took away from our conversation. Or here's the one thing I took away from the conversation. You know what I mean? And just leave people with something to think about for the rest of the day. Holy shit. Just listened to a great podcast with a guy by the name of Kellie, who's got this robotics company, and he's thriving. And everybody around him loves being with him. And the clients that work with him like being around him about that guy. And he attributes it to this, whatever that is, right? Everybody thinks about that one thing. To me, that's the key. If it's 1 or it's 3, I don't give a shit. As long as it's something digestible, right?
Wow. You know what? This comes full circle
I lost
for me.
you. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
I got you now. I got you now.
I don't know why I'm coming and going. This comes full circle for me. A video that I did in 1994 for a guy named Charlie Oliver, who I think would be a guest here, was speaking to the Positive Thinkers Club, Allan. Part of my thinking, I went in, recorded that for nothing. I put it up on YouTube, but I did it for me. So part of this conversation is motivational, just without a guest. You bring someone like Rick Hillier, Charlie Oliver, Carl Kenny, one of the Verifin founders, a politician, ex-premier, I don't know, someone in the opposition. Who gives a shit? Wow. The motivators to put someone out front. What is it? And then, it comes down to all those things, leadership, this, that, and the other thing. But the conversation, if it fires me up, then I would want to do this, and to your point, if it's a gig that we do, you know what? Every friggin' Tuesday morning, we do this. Yeah. And then we release it on a Thursday or something, because it could be, I can't wait to look at this recording that I've made here now and take some snippets out of it and edit it in a little package that maybe you can use on your social media and stuff. There's some nuggets in here that I think, And
then the other, and I guess the biggest piece of it all, what's going on? Happy belated birthday.
Now,
happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
How old are you? 45? 40.
40.
40. All right.
No, I'm not. Very nice, though.
I was trying to think how old you were. You must be 40. 42.
At plus 10. 52.
Things are good?
Yeah. I'm off today, so it's even better. Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Allan and I are chatting, Kellie, about a podcast we're hoping to do. And you know what, Allan? You said something special about bringing the kids to school. It's only since the pandemic in the car business, and a lot of the other times, you know, I had to be somewhere at a certain time, and the old school way of you know what, you got to be in the office at that time. I don't have any of that anymore. Take the kid to school, and you know, some of the times when Sebastian sits and talks to me, and you know he's a bit of a character, those nuggets are in the car on the way to school. So
Gerry, maybe there's a podcast there. You interview the kids who are getting taken to school. What do you like about this? You know what I mean?
You know what?
Because it means a lot to me. I can tell you. Yeah.
Kellie, I came up with the name Gale Force Wins, WINS. Anything of that?
For what?
Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, Kellie,
don't laugh at us.
Do we look like wizards still?
Yeah, you look like wizards. Harry Potter. Harry Potter called. They want you too. See ya.
See ya. I know where Sebastian gets the humor.
And on another note, you'll laugh at this. I don't know if I told you. So Convocation, I've been doing it for 20 years. They pivoted and they're going to do it live down at Jack Byrne Arena, socially distanced. Anyway, because the cases are rising, Monday I emailed them. I said, I haven't heard from you. You know, you were supposed to send me some. Oh, sorry to tell you, it's canceled. Yesterday, I get an email while I'm on a Zoom call at around 4 o'clock. Gerry, call us immediately. We need you. I'm like, okay. So I got off, called them around 4:15. They'd been trying to figure out how to do a live feed from a WebEx, I think they're doing. Anyway, long story short, Al, I'm back on. I'm going there at 12:30 today to do a practice, but I'm going to use basically this technology here. Look.
Yeah.
And if you can see, I got to get access to their Facebook account. It's nerve-wracking to do something live like that, you know, because I've, you know, for 20 years, I go in, videotape it, edit offline. But just another pivot, you know, here's something that, you know, I bought this camera 7 years ago. This is a Mevo camera for live broadcasting, and it is perfectly positioned to go live. And, you know, an iPhone can do it, but this thing is a 4K. Yeah. Anyway, it's exciting because, you know, I'm going to be able to deliver for them something that they're trying to do themselves, that they were practicing over the last few days and screwing it up. And they told me, like, Jesus, this is more complicated than I thought. And it's even going to rack my brain a little bit in terms of how I get the feed out of Memorial University. Is it quality and all that? But you picture this. You go in, the old radio remotes with VOCM and a big boom box. Remember that?
Yeah.
Allan, they used to charge $4,000 for that.
I know.
We could walk into a business with this, go live on their Facebook page, reach not more people, but more focused people. And anyway, I know that this is a concept that would work. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in you. That's something I'm excited about.
But Gerry, we have to figure out how we monetize this, right?
Right.
Like, you know, how does this create revenue? So that's another piece that I haven't quite figured out yet. I'm getting an echo there. That's better.
Got it?
Yeah, that's better.
I had it out for Kellie to hear you.
It's you know, we had to figure that piece out. And I think once we figure that out, and it doesn't have to be expensive or I reflect back on that Napster model, right? Remember when Napster was 99 cents for a song? And that wasn't bad. People paid that, you know, $10, you got 10 of your favorite songs, right? It was great. Like that model to me, I think still has a little bit of traction. So I don't know how we do that. I don't know how we put that into play, but that's kind of an important piece to it all. It's fun. Yep. Yeah. Anyway, right. I think, Gerry, we just got to figure out how to monetize it. And this is where, and maybe if we go on Gale Force, like how do we monetize it and how do we market it? Right?
Well, you know, just
maybe you know that. I don't know that. I don't know.
I'm pretty good at the marketing side of things. I'm getting even better in my peripheral association, and I call it peripheral association because I'm not on the execution side of anything that I'm pitching. That being said, I have my own website I created. I just set up my own they call it a vanity email, right? So it's got your name. I'm familiar with all that. I think that kind of stuff, Allan, is how you really can bring value to someone. But I tell you something, and I keep coming back to this, the model for entree leadership, and Dave Ramsey out of Nashville, is they do podcasts. I have free information coming at me. What I realize, and I know from reading about them, their concept is bring people in. So if you want to think about lead generation, their podcasts are all about a community. You're nurturing a community. And then they pick and choose who they want to do business with based on who needs more information. So for example, if you do a podcast, you and I will have, let's say we do a year's worth of podcasts, 4 a month. That's 48 podcasts. Someone who wants to have the personal touch is going to reach out to us. So monetization of the podcast is it could be, and I'm not saying this is the way it has to be. Yeah. I think it could be a peripheral thing that happens based on the fact that we're positioning ourselves as go-to people. I think about a guy by the name of Adnan Khashoggi. I'll never forget it. He was so connected. Now, he was clouded by the whole Iran arms deal and everything, but you and I are connectors. If you can connect someone to someone and there's a $10 million deal, then maybe there's a finder's fee. I don't know. I see this as being a platform for validation and potentially more lead generation. If it becomes extremely popular, then I think monetizing it becomes easier. The challenge with anything is when it's so niche. We might, like that lady you said, I don't know how many views. I should look up and see that video. And I don't remember where. I think I gave you the original, didn't you? And you posted on your LinkedIn. Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of metrics, maybe you're going to have a peek and see how many times it was viewed. But even so, what I've read about, marketing now, it's more about not necessarily if we get 10,000 viewers, but it's reaching the right people at the right time. Yeah. And that's more valuable than having, if you and I, it sounds good if we can out and say, Jesus, we got the most popular podcast in all of Atlantic Canada. I'm not sure that's our goal. Our goal, could be we reach 1,000 people. If those 1,000 people are people that we've made a difference for, who then become the next unicorn like Verifin, wow, our part in that will be more fulfilling than any dollar you could put in your wallet, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. My only concern, and I take your points for sure. My only concern is there's so much free information out there right now, right? There's so many free podcasts. I find sometimes if you want people to have skin in the game, right? You want people to have a little skin in the game. Otherwise, what's separating you from the masses? Like I just joined on Facebook. I just joined podcasts or whatever, right, in a Facebook group. And these are all these people talking about their podcasts. And I listen to a couple of them. I listen to a minute or two of a few of them, and they're just pure shite, right? I mean, they're just pure shite. Like you're not taking, some of them are ridiculous, right? I mean, how bad they are, right? But it's free. And I don't want to be mixed in with that group of the free people anymore. What I want to go is I say, look, guys, you got to have a little skin in the game. You join into this podcast, we're giving you a nugget of information here. You're walking away with something. That's worth 99 cents. That's all, man. It's worth 99 cents. And I'm saying, so if you got 1,000 viewers for every one of your podcasts at 99 cents, that's fantastic. Now, all of a sudden, the revenue, and all those other things still exist. All of those other things still exist. But 99 cents, that's a click of a button. No one's even thinking about it, right? Yeah, I want one good thing. Rick Hillier, yeah, I want the one good thing he's going to tell me, 99 cents, right? But now you bring your guests in. If we're making money off that podcast, what's in it for them? Or why would they? So you know what I mean? Like, why would they?
You know what? And the other thing, I listened to, you should listen to this guy, Leo Laporte, Leolaporte. He owns the Twit network. So he was a traditional media guy, TV, I believe, radio, maybe newspapers. Anyway, he went out on his own maybe 15, 20 years ago. He was a tech reporter. He created this thing called the Twit network, This Week in Tech, Twit. And he's based out of San Francisco. Well, holy shit. He has got like Ford. He's got all these like Cisco, Squarespace, all these. And you know what? They literally will read out live, oh, we're sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is the best web platform. And they flub it and everything. But it's such a good, and I've gone on I've poked around on many of their products. Ford, the automobile company, is one of their big sponsors, and it has positioned in my mind them as a technology behemoth. You know, their cars are very technologically advanced compared to all the other, Detroit automakers. So anyway, that's a monetization piece that we could have. And it's not about 10,000, Allan. It's about engagement of the people. So if we attract, for example, business people who have coin, then you get a sponsor who says, you know what, those 1,000 people are influencers. We want to be part of your podcast, right?
Right.
So,
anyway, you sell advertisements. Yeah. Anyway, but all that to say, Gerry, you're bang on. We should probably record 10, 15, 20 of them and get them out while we're thinking about all of this shit, get the thing out and start building the audience. You know what I mean?
So let's think about when we might do the first one. Maybe in 2 weeks' time. We'd have to, have some lead time and think. Ultimately, you kind of would like to get someone who has a bit of notoriety, if we could nail them down, and if we get someone in 2 weeks' time, and then we promote the fact that we're going to have this person, or even if we don't promote it, and we get. Between now and Christmas, we do 3 of these things, and each one of those people are known to a degree in their own industries. And then we figure out how we promote it through LinkedIn or whatever and say, you know what, we're going to have John Smith on, and John is an expert in this. Go ahead.
How long is our podcast? 10 minutes? Is it going to be 10?
I think the conversation would probably be 30 minutes, but then what we would actually broadcast, it cut it down a bit, I'm thinking 30 minutes would be, you and I now have been on here. We get carried away, but we've been talking for, what time did we come on? 10:30. We're an hour and 20 minutes chatting. Yeah. And if it's engaging, then I don't think, and that's one thing I listen to on the podcast thing. And if you listen to Netflix and you talk about like David Letterman and Jerry Seinfeld, what they talk about is, Letterman in particular felt constrained by TV and the amount of time. If we are this platform, if Rick Hillier comes on and wants to talk for a freaking hour, then Jesus Christ, let the man talk. If we could get them talking and he reveals shit that he's never ever talked about before, that is the value of this podcast. So, I'm not saying that we want it to be an hour and a half long, but if it does go for 40 minutes, so be it.
Yeah, you're right. Like, and if you look at comedians in cars getting coffee, that changes. Sometimes it's 9 minutes. Sometimes Obama was 17 minutes. Yeah, it just depends, right? But I'd like to keep it tight. Like, for example, I listened to a podcast about Porsches, and they limit their podcast to 9 minutes and 11 seconds for a 911, right? That's the gimmick. It's 9 minutes and 11. I love it. Because 9 minutes and 11 seconds are to the point. They get to it. I love it, right? Rick, love having you on the show. You've done a lot of great things. You do a little 30-second intro to Rick Hillier, right? Boom, that's all over. Put that behind us. Rick, what about growing up in a remote part of Newfoundland gave you this success? You've done some great things like we heard in the intro. What got you there? What is it about that upbringing that got you there? You know, that's what people want to walk away here. We want 10 minutes. And I want to know what the hell Rick Hilliard thinks is the one most important thing, right?
And you know what? You think about it, the whole concept of gale force, like a gale doesn't blow for days. It
doesn't blow for days.
Very concentrated wind event.
Yeah.
Get in, get out. So
yeah, that's right.
The whole marketing behind that could work really well. Right?
You know what I mean? I get in, get out, right? This is going to be rough for the next 10 minutes. You're going to be fast, it's going to flow, right? But you're going to walk away with something. And that's what our value is to you. You're going to walk away with something. You're going to walk away with something you didn't know or something that you could think about that might make your life a little bit better, right? That's our value.
I look forward to this. Again, motivated. I'm motivated to do something else. So I'm thinking, you know, well, let's give some thought and see if we can zero down on a few names, all right?
And that's the other thing. We got to be fun, man. This has got to be a fun podcast,
oh, yeah.
right?
Well, you know, I if you could get him, I would be very interested.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
See you, buddy.